Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous nights of the local time. First we're going to start with Kherson area. The Russians and the Ukrainians continue counter-artillery and counter-drone duels in this area. The Russians mainly concentrated their activity on the north of Novokakhovka, Krynki, Kazachye, Lagery. The main focus the settlements like Kazatskaya and Berislavs are the main focused Russian areas. On this video we can see how the Russians probably managed to discover the police office with the radars on the top on the roof of this building, and the Ukrainians were using these radars for communication, for controlling the drones, and the Russians of course tried to work with every single episode, with every single building in this area, trying to reduce as much as possible the Ukrainian possibilities. A little bit further to the northwest, the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian local artillery system M777 howitzer, and as a result of Lancet strike, the Russians destroyed that howitzer with the operational ammo depot in the vicinity of that area. From the Ukrainian side, we see a small control over supply and support roads that goes in Novokakhovka. In this, along the bank of the river, along the Dnieper River, the Ukrainians discover a few ammo trucks, supply trucks, and as a result of drone strikes, those supply trucks were destroyed. At least 2 of them were destroyed during the previous nights of the local time. At least we got update of the situation. Another supply truck was destroyed in the same city by the same drone squad. Maybe it was the same, but who redeployed their position. Anyway, we see a real counter-artillery and counter-drone duels in this area, without any activities and without any attempts from the Ukrainian side or from the Russian side to cross the Dnieper and to establish control on the opposite bank of the Dnieper River. Now we're moving to Orekhov, to the Bradley Square. The Ukrainians continue storming Operation Rabotina. Currently the settlement split in 2 parts. The northern one is central one is under Ukrainian control. The southern one is under Russian control. During the previous night, after very fierce battles and clashes inside the settlement, the Russians, when the night came, the Russians started bombing and shelling the northern part, trying to reduce the number of Ukrainian forces, their positions, armored vehicles, and so on. We see the number of artillery strikes and bomb strikes that were made during the previous night. Also, the Russians managed to discover one important ammo depot that the Ukrainians were using to supply and support their forces on the Bradley Square. As a result, as you can see, a very powerful air bomb. This entire ammo depot was destroyed. One more time, we see the missile or probably the bomb, and maybe it was a Jagger, Kinzhal or something like this. We see how heavy the strike was, and we see the results of the strike, the very heavy explosion. Probably the Ukrainians lost a very important ammo depot in this area. The Ukrainians tried to make some counter-artillery duels by suppressing the Russian artillery, but as you can see, the Ukrainian activity has been reduced in the previous days. Probably this situation is connected with the very heavy losses from the Ukrainian side due to clashes that took place in Rabotina during the previous 2 months. So anyway, we see that Ukrainians, that their reserves are coming to an end. When talking about Urozhaina, I have updated the map showing the southern part under Ukrainian control. Probably during the previous days they managed to complete the clearing of the southern part and dig in deeper. We haven't received any video or photo confirmation, but to my mind this is logically. The Russians continue counter-artillery duels, and they bombed the Ukrainian accumulation of the forces on the north of Pryutina, trying to reduce the Ukrainian forces and their possibilities to accumulate their forces before the next attack in the vicinity of Pryutina. And the Russians destroyed another M77 howitzer in the vicinity of Velika Novoselovka. After very heaviest losses of the Ukrainian forces on this bridgehead that took place during the Battle of Urozhaina and Staromayorska, we see that Ukrainians, probably it's a week passed since the big end of the battle of the settlement of Urozhaina when the Russians left. Then the Ukrainians made one attempt to attack, had significant losses, and now they need to finish regrouping before the next waves of attacks. But we see that now, almost from one attack to another, the Ukrainians need more and more time for regrouping and to restoring their power. Now we are moving further to Klishchiivka area to Bakhmut, to Artyomovsk area. We haven't received nothing from Klishchiivka, from Andreevka. After the Ukrainians were defeated due to unsuccessful attempt to attack, they need more time for regrouping, but now the Ukrainians have activated their activity on the northern flank in the vicinity of Zelyznyanska, Berkhovka, Yagidne. The Ukrainians during the previous night made another attempt to attack the Russian positions along the road that goes from Privilye in direction of Zelyznyanska, Paraskoyevka. The Ukrainians launched a small reconnaissance in combat operation that probably wasn't a real offensive operation. There was a small convoy with armored vehicles who were heading to the south. The Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian position, their movements, and after that they started bombing and shelling. As you can see on the video, there were around 3 armored vehicles, probably 1 tank and 2 personal carriers who were heading to the south in direction of the forest in the vicinity of Zelyznyanska. As a result of bombings and shelling, probably the Ukrainian forces were damaged and probably were destroyed, but yet we haven't received the results of that attack. As you can see, the Ukrainians managed to land their troopers and probably to get their positions in the forest lines. Maybe there is a clashes currently, and the Ukrainians continue their offensive operation in this direction. So basically the Ukrainians were trying to implement something like this. And if we increase the number of updates from this bridgehead, let's say since the beginning of the previous week, we see that the clashes in this area intensified. We see that that was not the first attempt of the Ukrainian forces to attack. A few days ago, they made another attempt to attack, to storm this area at the forest, and they managed to get as close as possible through the trenches. The Ukrainians bombed and attacked the forest heavily almost every single day. So we see that probably this week the Ukrainians will try to establish control over this forest, and they will try to force the Russians to step back further. Currently, this is their priority, at least on the northern flank of operational foothold, operational front combat line Artyomovsk, Bakhmut. Now we're moving further to the north, and when talking about Kupiansk Liman, we got just probably few important updates from this bridgehead. The Ukrainians during the previous night managed to discover another Russian ammo depot in the vicinity of Karamzinovka bridgehead, and as a result of drone strike, that ammo depot was destroyed. But the most important updates currently are coming from Veliki Novoselovsk town, from the settlement. If you remember, the Russians a few days ago announced that they managed to capture the settlement and to establish final control over this area, but currently the Ukrainians are counterattacking, and the situation is not so good for the Russians as they describe in their reports. For example, today we got the video. We will not publish the video, show the video, because of losses and casualties among the soldiers. The Ukrainians have managed to reach the railways in this area. After that, the Russians started bombing and shelling them with artillery, and the reconnaissance team was destroyed. Then the Russians was trying to send their infantry to the south, and the Ukrainians discovered the Russian movement, and after that the Ukrainians started bombing and shelling the Russians somewhere in this area, and the Russian squad was forced to retreat and to move back to the railway station. So what does it mean? Currently, I can't say that Novoselovsk is under 100% control under Russian forces. Probably the Russians controls the railways, controls the hills, and so on, but the Ukrainians counterattacks and try to return control over the settlement. If we increase the number of updates from this bridgehead, we're gonna see that there were a lot of attempts from the Ukrainian side to attack, to counterattack, and not just with infantry but also with armored vehicles and tanks. So the Ukrainians are not counting their losses, armored vehicles, in the battle for the settlement, and they understand the value of this bridgehead. They understand that if the Russians can dig in deeper, they anyway sooner or later the Russians will try to expand their bridgehead further to Berestove and to the south in direction of Stelmakhovka. And these two settlements are the vital questions, vital points for the Ukrainians on this foothold, and they can't lose. If they lose one of these bridgeheads, the entire front line can be collapsed automatically. So the clashes in this area will continue, but when taken about initiative, as I see currently, the initiative is under Ukrainian control and is on Ukrainian side. And probably that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.